So here I've got all of my pieces together. I'm going to be making a children's dinner set. So I've got plate, bowl and cup clays. Got just a kitchen butcher knife for cutting. Go into your cupboards, find whatever plate, bowl, cup you have, just to use as a mould. We'll be turning them upside down once we're ready to use them. So what you want to do is to try and find ones that have a smooth surface and nothing like that sticks out on the outside that would ruin the shape of your dish. So I've chosen, this is a travel cup. I've got a travel cup that I'm going to be using for this shape. I've got a soup bowl that I'll be using for this shape, and then a plate just to kind of have this surface to drape over. You also want a tea towel. Any tea towel is fine, but if it's got like a soft, sort of smoother texture, that's better for the clay, unless you want that texture to be mirrored in the clay. So what we'll be doing later is laying it over our bowl, plate, cup, so that the clay doesn't stick to the shiny surface, or the smooth surface rather. I've got plate, bowl, cup, tea towel to work with, rolling pin, kitchen rolling pin is fine. Clay is a non-toxic, or the clay that I use, air dry clay as well, is non-toxic, so you can use your kitchen bits, whatever you have, as you're making your pieces. Clay washes off really easily, and it's non-toxic, as I said, so you don't have to worry about getting something specially for your clay work. And then of course I've got the things handy that I'm going to be pressing in. One thing I do want to say, save your scraps as we make these pieces. Save your scraps, because then you can add a bit of dimension to your pieces. So obviously I don't have any strawberries yet because it's too early in the season. So what I'm going to be doing with my scraps is making little bitty strawberries to add to the outside of my dishes, just for a bit of something fun. So save your scraps. Once you have like a ball of scraps, like squish them up, put them back in your plastic bag so they don't dry out. I'm going to start with the plate because bigger things take longer to dry. So that's just kind of how I like to work. I also should have said to start with, make sure that you're doing this on some kind of tablecloth, because clay will stick to smooth surfaces. So you definitely want to use a cloth or a tablecloth. Tablecloth works best because it's not going to move as much as just a tea towel would as you're working on the surface. So yeah, clay, rolling pin, let's get started. So when you start, you roll out the clay just as if you were rolling out pastry, if you make pastry. I really like pies, so I make quite a lot of short crust pastry. One thing you need to do with clay though is every once in a while lift it, because on the bottom it sort of gets stuck to the surface, to the cloth, and it won't move. There are layers in there that won't move if you don't lift them. So every once in a while just give it a bit of a lift, which is easier to do once it's bigger, but once it's smaller, but when it's bigger it gets a bit trickier. just keep rolling. Try and keep it as much in a circular sort of shape as you can, unless you want a different shaped plate, which you can do. Be as creative as you want to. I'm going to go for a circular sort of thing, but I'm not going to be too fussy about it either, because I think that's the fun thing about having homemade stuff, is that it's unique. And now, as I would do with pastry, I'm going to just lift very gently, lift this out of the way, set it to the side, and I'm going to get my plate mold out. There we are. My tea towel. I should put it face up. It's got sheep. I love sheep. There we go. Now I'm going to use my rolling pin again to very carefully lift it up and over. Again, if you make pies, this is the same kind of motion that you would use if you were, well, upside down, but if you were transferring the pastry into your pie dish. So if you can make pastry, you can make plates, hand-built plates, and if you can make hand-built plates, then you can make pastry, just for a bit of fun. So there is my plate sort of shape, and you can see I'm not going to press the bottom too much because my plate has a rim, and I don't want there to be a rim imprint on the inside of my plate. I just want it to give the plate a bit of shape. So I'll just gently kind of press that down just so that I know where the outside line is. I'm not going to press the inside, just the outside a bit, and that will help me guide my trimming job. So I'll get my butter knife once I've sort of distinguished where that line is. Butter knife. Find a good place. This place is sort of the nearest to the edge, so I'm going to start here. And just very gently sort of follow that line. Cut that off. So first scrap. Keep your little bags handy. Put that scrap right back in so it doesn't dry out too much, because you've already been working with the clay. Moisture is already coming out of it into your cloth, and into the air obviously too. So you don't want to leave it out over long. That one. Yeah. Full circle. Okay. So I'm going to just push in the center a little bit. And just for fun, even though you don't really look at the bottom of your plate, I'm going to put a strawberry leaf in the bottom. Because later, when I'm finished pressing my plants in, I'm going to also write my name in the bottom. You have to sign your pieces because you made them. So I'm going to use my fingers, press those leaves in. What's helpful also is to use the back side of a teaspoon. I haven't got a teaspoon on me. But just nip to your kitchen door. I'll use my tool, but it is literally like the back side of a spoon. So metal spoon is fine, wooden spoon is fine, whatever kind of spoon you have. It just helps, I think, the firmness of it, because it's so hard, it can really press that plant or whatever into the clay, whereas your finger is squishy, so it's always giving a bit. So these firm tools like a spoon work really well to get that plant pressed into the clay, and all the veins in there as well. So I've got all of my pieces pressed in, and what I'm going to do now is to start peeling them off. You do need to have a bit of a steady hand, but it's not too hard. And if you're really struggling with a piece that you can't really pick at, you can get the sharp end of a knife to kind of help lift off underneath. So say for this one for example, it is pressed down quite well into the clay. So what I'm going to do is just lift it. You can fix any mistakes afterwards, but you can just lift it, get that little bit lifted, so that you can then grab it with your finger and then lift off. Okay. So you can begin pulling those pieces off. If some of the plant material stays in, that's okay. Like earlier I started to try to pick off the flower because I was going to try and see if I could use the flower again, and the flower stuck because it was just too delicate. I didn't want to lift out of the clay. That's fine, it'll stay in there, it'll dry up, might be able to lift it out later. Even if I can't, when I biscuit fire the pieces, it will burn up, so it's not a big deal. But you don't want it absolutely covered, because then it makes the kiln a bit messy. So just get what you can off, and then don't worry about the rest. So that's my plate finished for now. It needs to dry a bit before I can play with it anymore on the other side. So while it's drying, lift it with the plate just to a corner kind of out of the way, in your kitchen, if you have a corner on your worktop, wherever, and give it probably a couple hours really, to, potters call it, to become leather hard, so that if I were to try and pick this up right now, it would just completely collapse because the clay is too wet. So we wanted to harden up enough that we can handle it without it flopping, and it just takes a bit of time for that to happen. So while we're waiting for that, I'll set my plate aside, and we can come back to it later. You can see all the little details, the veins, the flowers. It's quite fun. Can't wait to see what sort of things everyone else comes up with. So now, before I set this aside, I want to add some strawberries, and I want to write my name as well. So you can take a pen or a pencil. Let's see what I've got here. Oh, I've got a stick. Or a stick. I've got a stick. Find a place on the bottom of your piece, or you can write things on the side as well. Our Sophie likes to write little poems along her pottery pieces. I'm going to write my name along this strawberry leaf, stem. There. I'm going to get my scraps out now and turn some of these scraps into little strawberries. So you can have fun with your scraps as well. And if you still have scraps left over after you've added little bits to your piece, you can always turn them into a little pinch pot or something. So that's quite fun. Right, I'm going to do a little collection of strawberries. So press them in. Because this clay is wet, you don't have to worry too much about them coming off. If the clay was dry, you'd have to do some other techniques to get them to stay. But for the moment, the clay is still wet enough to receive these little pieces. Whatever you add, just make sure you squash it on quite nicely, otherwise they will pop off. You can also take your spoon if you want and just press the sides down just so that it's sticking nice and solidly to the clay. Might help give it a bit of shape as well if you're looking for a particular shape. I think I'll do, might do a little bit of a leaf here as well, strawberry leaf. You can absolutely just have fun with this. Right, and now strawberries have those little pin seeds. So I'm going to take a needle, like a sewing needle, is really what you want. I'm going to take a little needle. This is a pottery needle, but you can use a sewing needle. And just make my strawberry seeds. Yeah. Just for a bit of fun. And you know, without a doubt, that it's strawberries. There it is. And I hope you've enjoyed this first little tutorial.